This is PERUSE TV for your extraordinary content.
In a world where almost every aspect of life involves politics through their political aspirations and influence around the world, the most famous people today are politicians. From the very earliest periods, when even the term politics was not invented yet, people involved in it are still in history today. Each country has got its own political legends, and we are to discuss about them as time goes by. In today's video, we are bringing the man who cannot miss on anyone's mind when we talk of Uganda's political journey, the man Yoweri Museveni, the current president of the Republic of Uganda since January 1986. This is the man who claimed the most portion of the presidency in Uganda out of the 9 that Uganda has had since its independence in 1962. Yoweri Museveni is indeed a dominant figure in Uganda's politics, having ruled the country since 1986 and has ruled it since for 38 years, making him one of Africa's longest serving leaders. Museveni's legacy is complex, with some crediting him for bringing stability and economic growth to Uganda, while others criticize him for his authoritarian tendencies and the violation of human rights. As no one is sure about his date of birth, it is estimated that he was born on 15th of September 1944 to parents Museveni Amos Kaguta, a cattle keeper and an ethnic hymner of the Kingdom of Mpororo, now part of Ankole, and Esther Kokundeka Nganzi in Ntungamo district. According to Julius Nyerere, the former president of Tanzania, Museveni's father Amos Kaguta was a soldier in the King's African Rifles 7th Battalion during World War II. Yoweri Museveni was born. Relatives used to say his father was Amu Seveni, meaning in the 7th. This is how he came to obtain the name Museveni, which was by then the British Protectorate of Uganda. Museveni's early childhood and education. Museveni attended Chamate Elementary School, then moved to Mbarara High School and Ntale School for his primary and secondary education respectively. He attended the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania for his tertiary education, where he studied his economics and political science. The university at the time was a hotbed of radical pan-African and Marxist political thought. While at the university, he formed the University Students African Revolutionary Front student activist group and led a student delegation to Frelimo, held territory in Portuguese Mozambique, where they received military training, studying under the leftist Walter Rodney, among others. Museveni wrote a university thesis on the applicability of Frantz Fanon's idea on revolutionary violence to post-colonial Africa. Looking at his personal life, President Yoweri Museveni is an Anglican by religion and a member of the Church of Uganda. We cannot forget the fact that Museveni is also a family man. He is married to Janet Kata Museveni Kainembabazi, with whom also he has 4 children, including General Kainerugaba Muhoozi, Natasha Karugire, born in 1976, the former Muhoozi, born in 1974, Patience Lwabogo, born 1978, who is a pastor by calling, and Diana Kamuntu, born 1980. Looking at his personal or else political career and legacy of General Yoweri Museveni, let's start by the year 1971. The exile forces opposed to Idi Amin invaded Uganda from Tanzania in September 1972 and were repelled. In October, Tanzania and Uganda signed the Mogadishu Agreement that denied the rebels from the use of Tanzanian soil for aggression against Uganda. Museveni broke away from the mainstream opposition and formed the Front for National Salvation, FRONASA, in 1973. And in August of the same year, he married his wife, Janet Kataha Museveni Kainembabazi. In October 1978, Ugandan troops invaded the Kagera City salient in northern Tanzania, initiating the Uganda-Tanzania War. Tanzanian President then Julius Nyerere ordered the Tanzanian People's Defense Forces to counterattack and mobilize the Ugandan dissidents to fight Amini's regime. Museveni was praised by the development, and in December 1978, Nyerere attached Museveni and his forces to Tanzanian troops under Brigadier Silas Mayunga. Museveni and his Fonasa troops subsequently accompanied the Tanzanians during the counter-invasion of Uganda. He was present during the capture and destruction of Marara in February 1979 and involved in the Western Ugandan campaign of 1979. In the course of these operations, he alternatively spent time at the front lines in Tanzania. And while in Tanzania, he talked about the cooperation of various anti-Amin rebel groups as well as the political future of his native country, Uganda, and Tanzanian politicians and other Ugandan opposition figures such as Milton Obote. He played a crucial role and part in the Moshi Conference, which led to the unification of the opposition as the Uganda National Liberation Front, UNLF. Yusuf Lule being the appointed UNLF chairman and the potential president of Uganda after Amini's overthrow. Museveni felt dissatisfied with the results of the conference, believing that he and his followers were not granted enough representation in the then party. The Bush War. Let's read 1980 to 1986. Everything was summed up. This is the year 1986 that brought Yoweri Museveni into power. Obote II and the National Resistance Army. With the overthrow of Amin in 1979 and the contested election that returned Milton Obote to power in 1980, Museveni returned to Uganda with his supporters to gather strength in their rural strongholds in the Bantu-dominated south and western of the country, forming the Popular Resistance Army (PRA). This group and rebel group planned a rebellion against the second Obote regime, that's Obote II, and its armed forces, which is the Uganda National Liberation Army (UNLA). And the insurgency began with an attack on the army installation in the central Mbende district, Kabamba, on February 6, 1981. The PRA later was joined or merged with the former President Yusuf Lule's fighting group, the Uganda Freedom Fighters, to create the National Resistance Army, with its political wing, the National Resistance Movement (NRM). Two other rebel groups, the Uganda National Rescue Front (UNRF) and the former Uganda National Army (FUNA), engaged the Obote's forces. The FUNA was formed in the West Nile region, sub-region, from the remnants of the former President Idi Amin Dada's supporters. This NRA developed a 10-point program for an eventual overthrow of the current government, and this was the program that the new elected government, once installed, was to follow. Covered in the 10-point program that the government had said was democracy, security, consolidation of national unity, defending national independence, building an independent, integrated, and self-sustaining economy, improvement of social services, elimination of corruption and misuse of power, redressing inequality, cooperation with other African countries, and a mixed economy. This comes after the Central Intelligence Agency's World Factbook estimated that the Obote regime was responsible for more than 100,000 civilian deaths across Uganda. The 1985 Nairobi Agreement. On July 27th of 1985, subfactionalism within the Uganda People's Congress government led to a successful military coup against Obote by his former army commander, Lieutenant General Tito Okello Lutwa and Acholi. Museveni and the NRA were angry that the revolution for which they had fought for 4 years had been hijacked by the UNLA, which they viewed as having been discredited by gross human rights violations during Obote. Despite these reservations, the NRA eventually agreed to peace talks presided over by a Kenyan delegation headed by President Daniel Arap Moi. The talks, which lasted from 26th of August to 17th of August of December, were notoriously acrimonious, and the resultant ceasefire broke down almost immediately. The final agreement, signed in Nairobi, required that Kampala was to be demilitarized, or the troops in Kampala had to be removed or withdrawn. Then there should be integration of the NRA and government forces and the absorption of the NRA leadership into the military council, and these conditions were eventually unmet. With the help of the then President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Zaire by that time, General Mobutu Sese Seko, who was asked by President Museveni to forestall the involvement of Zairian forces in support of Okello's military junta, and on 20th January 1986, 700 troops loyal to Amin were accompanied into Ugandan territory by the Zairian military. The forces intervened the following secret training in Zaire and an appeal from Okello 10 days previously. By 22nd January, government troops in Kampala had begun to quit their posts and mass as the rebels gained ground from the south and southwest of the country. And a few days later, Kampala was subdued by the rebel group led by Yoweri Museveni, who was the commander of the troops, and he assumed office in 1986 on 29th January. This is not a mere change of guard. It's a fundamental change, Museveni said, after a ceremony conducted by British-born Chief Justice Peter Allen. Speaking to the crowds of thousands outside the Ugandan parliament, Museveni promised to return to democracy. The people of Africa, the people of Uganda, are entitled to a democratic government. It is not a favor from any regime. The sovereign people must be the public, not the government. Although Museveni headed a new government in Kampala, the NRM, as a party, could not project its influence fully across the whole territory of Uganda, hence finding itself in a number of fights against some internal insurgencies. From the very beginning of his presidency, he drew strong support from the Bantu-speaking people from the south and the southwestern, where Museveni has his base. Museveni managed to get the Karamojong, a group of semi-nomads in the sparsely populated northeast that had never had a significant political voice, to align with him by offering them a stake in the new government. The northern region along with the Sudanese border proved more troublesome. In the West Nile sub-region, inhabited by the Kakwa and Lugbar, who were close relatives to Idi Amin Dada, who had previously supported him also. The UNRF and the FUNA rebel groups fought for years until a combination of military offensives and diplomacy pacified the region. The leader of the UNRF, Moses Ali, gave up his struggle to become the second deputy prime minister. People from the northern parts of the country viewed the rise of a government led by a person from the south with a great concern. Rebel groups sprang up among the Lango, Acholi, and Teso peoples, though they were overwhelmed by the strength of the NRA, except in the far north, where the Sudanese border provided a safe haven for the same. The Acholi rebel Uganda People's Democratic Army (UPDA) failed to dislodge the NRA occupation of Acholi land, leading to the desperate Chilism of the Holy Spirit movement. The defeat of both the UPDA and HSA left the rebellion to a group that eventually became known as the Lord's Resistance Army, which was led by the rebel leader Joseph Kony, which turned upon the Acholi people themselves. The NRA subsequently earned a reputation for respecting the rights of civilians, although Museveni later received some criticism for using child soldiers during the war. Undisciplined elements within the NRA soon tarnished a hard-earned reputation for fairness. When Museveni's men first came, they acted very well. "We welcomed them," said one villager. But then they started to arrest people and killing them. In March 1989, Amnesty International published a human rights report on Uganda for the 3 years that the government had been in power since 1986. This report documented gross human rights violations committed by the NRA troops. According to Olala Otono, a United Nations diplomat, added that Museveni pursued a genocide to Nilotics, Luo-speaking living in the northern part of the country in one of the most intense phases of the war between October and December 1988. The NRA forcibly cleared approximately 100,000 people from their homes in and around Gulu town. Soldiers committed hundreds of extrajudicial executions as they forcibly moved people, burning down homes and granaries. In its conclusion, the report offered some hope. It said, any assessment of the NRM government's human rights performance is perhaps inevitably less favorable after 4 years in power than it was in the early months. However, it is not true to say, as subcritics and outside observers, that there has been a continuous slide back towards gross human rights abuse, that in some sense Uganda is fated to suffer at the hands of the bad new government. On September 13, 2019, Museveni's former Inspector General of Police, General Kalikawa, was placed on the United States Department of the Treasury sanctions list for gross violation of human rights during his reign as the IGP from 2005 to March 2018. This was due to activities of the Uganda Police's Flying Squad unit that involved torture and corruption. Kaiwa was subsequently replaced with Martin Ochola. The first elections in Uganda were held in 1996. The elections were held on 9th May 1996, and Museveni defeated PERUSE TV of the Democratic Party, who contested the election as a candidate for the Inter-Party Forces Coalition, and the upstart candidate Kibirige Mayanja. Museveni won with 75.5% of the vote from a turnout of 72.6% of eligible voters. Although international and domestic observers described the vote as valid, both the losing candidates rejected the results. Museveni was sworn in as a president for the second term on 12th of May 1996. And in 1997, he introduced the free primary education (UPE). The second set of elections were held in 2001, and Museveni got 69% of the vote to beat his rival Kizza Besigye. Besigye had been a close confidant of the president, and it is said that he was his physician during the Ugandan Bush War. Him and the president had a terrible fallout shortly before the 2001 elections, when Besigye decided to stand for the presidency. The 2001 election campaigns were a heated affair, with Museveni threatening to put his rival 6 feet under. The election culminated in a petition filed by Besigye at the Supreme Court of Uganda. The court ruled that the elections were not free and fair, but declined to nullify the outcome by a 3-2 majority decision. The court held that although there were many cases of election malpractice, they did not affect the result in a substantial manner. Chief Justice Benjamin Odoki and Justices Alfred Karokora and Joseph Mulenga ruled in favor of the president of the respondents, while Justices Arthur Hagai, Odell, and John Sekoko ruled in favor of Besigye. That's all we had today for the president of Uganda, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, and we shall continue to dive into his life as time goes on. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting this channel. May the Lord God bless you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel PERUSE TV so that we can continue to learn. We still have a lot more for you. Do not hesitate to subscribe and share, like, and comment. See you next. Bye bye.